Okay, welcome to another episode of the Greatness Engineering Hour show, the show where we bring you all the champion and all the greatness engineers, people who have conquered, challenges and mountains sometimes, and but still, have survived, have been able to get to the next level of their greatness and really, now be role model for a lot of us. Today we're going to the US. Our guest today is an amazing and powerhouse, a lady, beautiful inside and out, and we're gonna get to know her because she has an extraordinary story, and we're gonna learn a lot from her today. So we're gonna talk about her experience with death. Can you imagine? And also get to know her, professionally, because she's also a technical leader. And she has been on almost all the platforms. She is well known not only for, for the near death, for being a near death survivor, but also, she's a transformational leader. She's a global speaker, and she works a lot and trying to find the intersection between advanced technology and humanity, because she is first a technology leader. So, like I said, I mean, she's spoken around the world. I mean, with some of the leading opera artists, celebrity, journalists, thought leaders. I mean, you name it, she'll get the opportunity to introduce herself, and she's currently an ambassador to New York-Presbyterian Hospital and Columbia University Medical. And the key thing, is that she experienced something exceptional in her life, and she basically turned the attention of a lot of people when she came up and talk about a near-death experience in which doctor could not resuscitate her over 90 minutes. Can you imagine? Almost an hour, more than an hour. So we will learn a lot about, we will learn a bit more about this experience and understand, how she went through and came back to continue to engineer greatness for us in the technology arena globally. And she's involved in blockchain, and she's one of the top women in the blockchain area. So let's start. Let's welcome Cherie Aimée, because that's her name, and have a great conversation with her, and learn a little bit more about the different experiences, especially her near-death experience and how she managed to conquer, come back, and still become an influencer, this time in the technology world. So let's start, and please come in, let us know where you're watching from, and also participate, because you're going to learn a lot from her today. We're going to talk about leadership and how she's integrated whatever she went through as a near death survivor, and also as a woman in a male dominated environment, how she went through and integrated all of this to create an authentic leadership which serve her still right now.
Right? On memories. But as I got older, I started to be more aware of some of the abusive sides of
A warm welcome to you, Cherie. Welcome to the Greatness Engineering Hour show. It's such a pleasure to welcome you on my platform because you are. I'm really, really, really happy to get to have a great conversation with you today.
Well, thank you, Mariel. It is such an honor to be on your show. I have been seeing you rocking the world for the past several years, and truly, I am so honored that you invited me on because I know how much of a powerhouse you are in your field.
Oh my God, you are a powerhouse as well. And we're going to learn more about you today because there's
Mhm.
so much, and, not only so much wisdom, but also, an extraordinary story. So, which leads me to ask you, tell us a little bit about you and the key moment in your life.
Mm. Well, first and foremost, I like to call myself now. I am a humanitarian. First and foremost, I am. I had an incredible near death experience that gave me the biggest spiritual awakening, but not even just spiritual. It affected all areas of my life, and the wisdom that I gained from not just a near death experience, but the years that it took for me to recover from such a devastating health crisis really rocked my world and caused me to question literally everything that I had ever known about life. And so today, what I want to do is, discuss um, how my life was impacted and how I've been able to showcase the wisdom and the lessons that I've learned and apply it to everyday life. I like to say that I provide practical solutions inspired by universal wisdom. And I think anybody that's ever worked with me in any industry will know that I am a big uh, proponent for humanity and social good and doing what's in the best interest for the whole. And there's no better way than to really describe um, or encompass, my values, the virtues that I embody, and my biggest passions in life than through, kind of my own definition of really what it means to be a humanitarian.
So yeah, it's and I've known you for a few years. I mean already, and I
Mhm.
can see that, and I can see how you've been able to blend, the practical with the spiritual, and sometimes that's something that's really difficult to do. And so my question is to know, how, what was your life, before, the near death experience, and how, this experience helped you in, accomplishing what you want to do, which is blending the practical and the spiritual.
Yeah, well, it's very interesting because prior to my near death experience, I kept my life, I was almost living two different lives. So I was living as a tech programmer in the
Mhm.
very beginning of the internet. So I feel accomplished in that. I feel like I helped build the internet. So I was a self-taught programmer, and I started very, very early on, 1999, not to date myself. But I was a self taught programmer. I learned very, very quickly and rose up very quickly in terms of becoming quite a bit of a value to the industry and ultimately became very well sought after as a programmer in my field. And, you know, it was so fun for me. It was an honor, but I don't think I appreciated it as much then that I do now because I realized that I was very early on in this tech industry that has just exploded, you know, since those early days. And my love for it was so genuine. And it was out of a genuine passion to build something new and exciting and fresh in the world, and almost communicate my own expressions, um, my own desire for what I want to see in the world. And I just did that through programming. So that's a kind of a very different way of looking at, you know, what you would normally think of as a programmer, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm kind of describing it more as if I felt like an artist in
Mm-hmm.
the
Mm-hmm.
world.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
but back then I really had to keep more the practical, the technical, the science side of me. I had to keep that separate from this whole other life that I was living behind the scenes, that was very into spirituality, that was very into learning about why are we here? What is our existence? You know, what is our purpose? So I would say, like in my 20s, early 20s, I really started pondering those bigger life
Mm-hmm.
questions. And for several years, I just lived these two completely different lives. And the people and my communities never crossed,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
right? The discussions never crossed. And as I got older, I started, you know, finding that to be very, very frustrating for me, because I felt like I could never fully be my true value, you
Mm-hmm.
know, in the world. It was always, you either got half of me over here or half of me over there. And what shifted was this health crisis that literally knocked me off my feet. And I ended up questioning everything about life. And so after I came out of this tragedy, several years after recovering, to be honest, I was too tired to
Mm-hmm.
separate those worlds, you know, and it didn't even make sense to me anymore. We are living in one world
Mm-hmm.
that has many different layers to it. There's so much depth to life, and we all need each other,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I started saying to myself, you know, the people in medicine, the people in technology, they need just as much of this universal wisdom
Mm-hmm.
and self care and inner guidance and trusting in themselves as the world becomes more and more complex.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So what I saw was my life pre near death experience, where we didn't live in a world where I could merge the two.
Mm-hmm.
But after my near death experience, something had shifted in the space of technology. We became extremely interconnected globally.
Mm-hmm.
And that was something that was a big, big shift from the earlier years of exploring the internet. But
Mm-hmm.
once the internet started taking off, I noticed the world became more international. It became more complex. And that changed a lot of things. That changed the structure of things. That changed how we all interact. All of a sudden, we had to start conceptualizing our lives outside of just our little neighborhoods, you
Mm-hmm.
know, outside of our own countries. We had to start taking into consideration our neighbors. For
Mm-hmm.
example, I'm in the US and our neighbors in Australia, right? And so all of a sudden, our lives opened up to the world.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And what that did was, for me, it allowed me to really finally ask myself, what is the true vision that I see
Mm-hmm.
for the world? And how can I utilize my wisdom
Mm-hmm.
to help even inspire during such complex times?
Mm-hmm.
Right?
And that's the question, is that, with all this complexity, all this uncertainty, what do we do? I mean, how can we merge things, and make sure that they integrate, with each other? Because, like you said, we all part of a big thing, and we are linked in a way, and we can't separate ourselves, especially now that everything is global. So we need to find a way to resolve, all those, disconnect, that are happening. And that's where the spiritual, I think, is coming. Yes, we have all the practical, all the technology, but then there's a missing link, which is the spiritual. So let's have a small break to see who we have here today. We have Ephraim. Ephraim is from Perth, so he's watching from Perth, Australia. Hi, Ephraim. Thanks for tuning in. We have Chikas. She's watching from Nigeria, and she's also enjoying the fact that, we blend. You were talking about blending the practical with the spiritual, and I think, a lot of us now start to understand it, because, with the complexity comes the reflection, and also, trying to look at different, from different angles, and identify new dimensions. So let's have a break, to watch a video, and we'll come back and continue our conversation.
That was Cherie, who flatlined for nearly 90 minutes.
Cherie was dead, but miraculously came back to life and now has a profound near-death experience to share.
My last treatment was on my birthday. I survived. I was cancer-free. This was my second chance. I beat cancer. There was an intuitive sense that something is not right in my body. I went to bed that night staring at my beagle, and I cried myself to sleep. That's the last thing I remember. I died the next day. They attempted to call my time of death within 5 to 10 minutes, and one doctor in that room said, no, we're gonna keep going. A couple of seconds right before I flatlined, and I remember saying to myself, wow, I'd spent my whole life worrying and wondering, how do you prepare for that moment when you die? That fear of death really prevents you from truly living. Fear of what other people thought. Fear of not being good enough. Now I flipped the script. This is an opportunity to really step into your power, step into your light, and really go after what it is you're looking to create. This is where we're going to be speaking later.
I am so excited to be finally making videos again for my YouTube
Our
channel.
energy, how we relate to the world, goes way beyond what we think it does. If you had everything wiped from you, and by some miracle, you were given a second chance to do it all again, how are you going to live this life?
Wow. So we are back with Cherie. So Cherie, you were declared, dead for an hour and a half.
Yes.
So what happened? What happened, and what did you bring back with you?
Yeah. So I was at the height of my success. I was CEO of my own tech firm. So like I said, I had just become very well known as a programmer, and I was in and out of engineering firms, technology, corporate, and ended up in advertising firms in their digital departments. And I did that for several years, and just was ready to open the doors to my dream, which was always to be the CEO of my own company. And I did it, and it was a huge success from the beginning. And then I ended up having health issues that took its toll for about 8 months or so. And a few months later, I ended up finding myself flatlining in the middle of the emergency room of my local hospital. And my husband was with me, and I actually flatlined right in his arms. And I was unconscious and dead, for lack of better words, for several minutes. They were trying CPR on me and were just unsuccessful. And so there was just one man in that emergency room that refused to give up. And he ordered everyone else in the emergency room to continue with chest compressions. And they did that for over an hour and a half. And during that time, he was able to hook me up to life support that would allow oxygen to the rest of my organs, not knowing if I was brain dead at that point. And during that time, two things happened. Number one, I drifted off into what I describe as the afterlife. And I experienced a whole series of events that have been coined by medical researchers as the near-death experience. And at the same time that that was happening, I was whisked off about an hour and a half south to New York City, where I was admitted to the OR of New York-Presbyterian Hospital, Columbia University in Manhattan. And there I underwent about an 18-hour open heart surgery, trying to figure out what happened to me and why they could not get my heart to restart. And it was a very, very complex situation. They could not get my heart to restart. And so I was one of the pioneer patients to be kept alive on an external heart device. And I broke several medical records on various different forms of life support and remained in and out of a coma for about 3 months until I finally started recovering. And the last month in the hospital, I was able to kind of be weaned off of life support. And at that point, I would say it was by the third, fourth month, it looked like, okay, she might survive. And so, again, this is more of a condensed version of what happened, but I ended up being able to leave the hospital, but and go home, but I was in heart failure, end stage heart failure, meaning my heart had experienced too much trauma from, the heart's not meant to stop beating, let alone to stop beating for hours and hours and hours. So while a lot of advanced medical technology was keeping me alive, I had a lot of implanted devices, kind of bypassing the heart, and I was literally a cyborg. But I was able to come home for about 4.5 years on a portable life support, which was a bionic heart. So it acted and assisted my failing heart for about 4.5 years until I was able to go in for a heart transplant. And I got the call one October evening at midnight that a heart was ready. and had my heart transplant and came home several months later to build a new life for myself after this is now years after the cardiac arrest, which is what it was. And so you were asking about the wisdom I came back with. Well, I faced death. I faced death, and the biggest awakening I came back with was realizing that the soul never dies. And because I was able to experience that for myself, I don't have the fear of death anymore. And that was something I had feared my whole life. And the freedom that opened up for me allowed somebody like myself was always successful, but I was pretty shy inside. And I had so many fears of living freely and boldly out in the world. There was a disconnect between my life and what I thought was only for other people. And so you've seen me now with the clip you've just shown. You've just shown someone that used to live a life that big, successful, but that big. My soul was being squashed in a human body. So I was living this much. But with the elimination of this fear of death, suddenly I just had to experience the world. I had to get out there. I had to share this newfound wisdom of life and excitement. And I wanted other people that were stripped down and worn down from life, tired, exhausted from having to be somebody that they were not, or having to play half of who you are. I wanted them to feel the freedom that I had it was like this tornado of freedom that just exploded, in my life. And that clip that you just showed is how I just went from bedridden in a wheelchair, unable to feed myself, multiple open heart surgeries, constantly having to rebuild my physical body after bedridden in the hospital for months. Your whole body just atrophies. And I came back after my heart transplant, and I was crying my eyeballs out, sitting on the edge of my bed, staring out at all the people walking by, saying, my God, what happened to my life? In an instant, everything was gone. And I one day said, Cherie, remember the wisdom that you learned in this near-death experience. Yes, your body feels broken right now, but you are not broken. You're not broken. That's a lie that the world has told you, that something is wrong with you. You know what I'm saying? And so what happens is, when life gives us obstacles, here I was, a young CEO, now in a wheelchair. Her husband has to feed her. I lost the business, of course. And I somehow had to find the strength to know that I still had value in the world, I had to tap into wisdom to do that. Practical solutions were not enough. The practical, the technical, it wasn't enough because life had dealt me a blow. And that is the human experience. And so, really, the most powerful thing was experiencing that freedom and then wanting to come back to the world to let everybody know you're not broken. You're not broken.
And that's the hard part, because when we listen to what you went through, you basically went to rock bottom.
Yeah.
And, and there's no way, that, some people, when I listen to it, there's no way somebody will come back and look so radiant like you are right now, and that's the amazing thing. And that's why I was asking the question is that, what did you bring back to be able to, evolve, as I don't even know what term to use, because it's very important. And like you said, it's not just practical thing. It has to be wisdom. It has to be something, above, and which lead me to this question, your mindset. How did your mindset, work in this difficult moment? Because you have to be in a certain mindset to understand that, yes, my body is completely gone. I don't, it's just what it is. But I'm not broken. Like you said, I'm not broken. I have, I still have a future.
Yeah. It was a tough, it was a tough transition. It takes a certain level of humility that an ability to stare the truth right in the face. Because what we do, and I don't think we realize this, but what we do is when we don't like something, a situation, we skirt around the issue. And the way we skirt around the issue is by blaming or victimizing ourselves. So the awareness had to come first before you can even switch the mindset. And even before the awareness has to be the commitment. So really, the first step for me was sitting on my bed, crying in misery every day of my life. That's one option. That's one option. The other option, I can figure out. I don't know the other option, but I can figure it out. So what I did know was I knew I had a choice. I knew the choice could be misery in my mind, or let me explore what another option could be. So the first step was I just had to make a commitment. Yeah. I had to choose. Which is it going to be, Cherie? Which is it going to be? Because this is reality. You're in a wheelchair right now. And there's no amount of tears.
It's going to change that.
No, I still woke up. I still woke up to the nightmare. It didn't change anything, And so you know what I did? I said, let me humor myself. That's how I made the commitment. I didn't believe it, I didn't believe there was another way. I just said, let's play a game.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to humor myself. And I set a time limit and I said, I'm going to make a commitment for 3 months. 3 months. I'm going to humor myself with the wisdom that I learned.
Mm-hmm.
Like, okay, if everything I saw in my near-death experience is really how the universe works, if it's really how we heal ourselves,
Mm-hmm.
I'll give you 3 months.
Mm-hmm.
And I made the commitment. And the next step really was now becoming aware of how was I thinking every day? Where was my focus? I had to shift my focus in order to make room for something new.
Mm-hmm.
So you really have to become aware of, oh, look at how all day I'm talking about in my head about being a victim.
Mm-hmm.
And then I had to remind myself, what's the commitment? So it really becoming aware of where my thoughts were every single day and being willing to play the game. After the awareness, it really came down to what was I going to replace those thoughts were. So it's like, what was the new focus going to be?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So again, you're still feeling horrific. This is not easy work. This is the inside, the inner work. So really, it was like, what's my new focus going to be then? Again, the choice, crying or something else.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where creativity comes into play. And you start experimenting. Well, if I can't allow myself to stay in victim mode, I better just like draw every day.
Mm-hmm.
So I would find whatever it was that I could literally keep my mind out of the negative thoughts.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So you're still not saying, oh, yeah, there's a better life ahead of me. Right? What you're doing is you're stripping away that which no longer serves you.
Mm-hmm.
You're still in uncertainty. You still don't even know if this is going to work.
Mm-hmm.
But the mindset is you taking your power back over control of your mind.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you don't take control over your mind, it likes to do its own thing.
Mm-hmm.
So again, how can I get creative and fill more and more things that feel good into my vibration? And before you know it, it starts to push out and fill up the space that
Mm-hmm.
used to take up all the negative thoughts, the self-doubt, the I'm not worthy, the my life is never going to get better. And I will tell you that something happens when you practice these first four steps, is that you end up at the fifth step,
Mm-hmm.
which is you have an entirely new shift.
Mm-hmm.
And you create an entirely new paradigm in your life of possibilities.
Mm-hmm.
Things start opening up for you because you have just trained your mind to get out of the dark cloud and to start seeing the light in the clouds. And what would happen is I started seeing little avenues of hope.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll give you an example. When you're crying all day, you can't think of solutions. So let's say, for example, I'm crying because I'm in bed and I can't get myself from my bed to my wheelchair to even feed myself. Okay, so I'm home alone, just so you know, since this heart transplant. So I can't feed myself. I can't walk. I'm home alone because my husband's working. So we're talking rock bottom. And I couldn't see how I could go from my bed to even having an ounce of energy. I just got out of the hospital. There's nobody in my house helping me. How am I ever going to get better? How is there any hope for my life if I can't even get better through food? But when you're in the dark space, you can't figure out any solutions. But once I started using the energy of creativity, it cleared those pathways of darkness in my brain so that my synapses could start firing with actual, real creative solutions. And I very quickly from that point on figured out how to start getting myself strong enough from the bed. And within a very short amount of time,
Wow.
I was back in the kitchen making myself. I couldn't cook. I couldn't move my hands very well. I couldn't do this, but I found a way to make smoothies every morning. So when you say, you've seen me so radiant, what many people didn't know was I was radiant because I was drinking smoothies all day. I still wasn't walking. This is what people don't understand about me. There was a huge part of building my brand. I was still in dire straits. But you didn't really know because even if I verbalized it to you, you were so overpowered by how energized I looked that you didn't understand I was live streaming still in my wheelchair. You didn't understand that when the camera went off, I was still purging years of surgical painkillers from my system. But do you see how that one thing of just making and taking care of what I put in my body and making that my mission, do you see how I became a global speaker? If you just take that little challenge and then you keep doing it every day and you keep focusing on the positive and you keep filling up your vibration with positivity and drowning out the negative and constantly stripping away that which no longer serves you. I got stronger and stronger and stronger. Baby steps. It was baby steps. Nobody could do it but me. That's the tough part. That's the tough part about changing your life. It would be so easy, Muriel, and I would be so justified if I spent the rest of my life trying to get government help here, this help here, this. I would be so justified
Mm-hmm.
But the stress of doing that wasn't worth it for me. Because if anybody has ever had to deal with government assistance, disability, or any of these things, it's not easy. And it's extremely, extremely stressful to our mental state. And they know it.
Mm-hmm.
They know it. They don't make it
Yeah,
easy.
they don't make it easy on purpose.
Absolutely. Because the harder it is, the less they have to pay you.
Mm-hmm.
So again, it was just a choice. I had to find out for myself if there was another way that didn't rely on anything but myself and my own inner wisdom. And this is a tiny, tiny example of just how I got some nourishing food in my body so that my cells could start to heal. And I did a little bit of exercise each day from my bed, but then just launched myself,
Mm-hmm.
into technology again, something I thought I would never have the opportunity to bring value to the technical space ever again.
Mm-hmm.
Never in my wildest dreams. Never in my wildest dreams did I think I would land on national TV, let alone in Australia.
Yeah.
So,
No, it's wonderful. It's just wonderful, and it again, like you said, it's a choice.
it is.
It's a choice. However, you say, okay, I mean, there's no hope. I just have to, give up, or you start to do baby steps, like you said. It's and focus on the increment instead of
Yes.
trying to maybe compare yourself to people around you who are working, who are doing other things. Just looking at yourself and see, okay, today I've been able to to do one small step, and then go and go, and until you realize you're there. And I think sometimes people are impatient because they want things straight away. If they have a problem, they want it to be solved straight away, and that's really difficult. And that's why I wanted to ask you, now that you are in the technical space, how do you use those skills, and how do you use them? And especially now with the uncertainty that the pandemic has brought, the economy again being challenged. So what leadership, what did you bring, from your experience? What do you think can help people right now?
Yeah. Well, I think it's interesting. I think the
Mhm.
tech space is in an interesting space, just like
Mhm.
in every industry. Um, I've always brought, as I've been back into the tech space, I've always brought this same wisdom into the space. And
Mhm.
I will tell you, this is pre-pandemic.
Mhm.
It is very well received.
Mhm.
Very, very well received, which has been a beautiful awareness for me.
Mhm.
So it's not like I'm speaking and nobody knows what I'm talking about. It really resonates on a deep level for, C-suite executives, even, startup founders, CEOs of very, very large, multiple $1 million, companies. They get it, which was beautiful for me to witness. When it comes to implementing it, that's where I see there's still a little bit of a pushback, um, because, like you said, of the patience that's required. So what I found is that while so many people can relate to this bigger human message, this message of humanity that I'm bringing, there is still, I think, a fear of where that fits in when we're still coming from this mindset of competition. And I think we know that the future really is going to be in collaboration. We can't keep going down this path of, dominate and, obliterate everything in sight. That doesn't have humanity written all over it. That doesn't really have humanity's best interests in mind. So, the future really is in the collaboration, is in diversity, is in inclusion. But we're kind of just in the beginning of this transformation. So it's going to take a while. Now, once the pandemic hit, I realized one of the things, despite the horrific news that has come out, the lives lost, the devastation, the financial loss. I mean, it's scary, right? Everyone's feeling the fear of uncertainty. But what I realized was this pandemic has actually been a gateway, almost like a gateway portal into these two worlds that are kind of coexisting right now. So when we're coming from a world that's built on competition and manipulation, through advertising and data and all of that stuff, and we're trying to be out here building this world of collaboration and social good and what's good for the whole, there's going to be some challenges with making that transition. And I wasn't quite sure how that transition was really going to happen fast enough, because I saw a level of urgency that needed to take place. But I didn't see people as open-minded as fast in order to make this transition. So when the pandemic came right in between of these two worlds and forced people all of a sudden to become aware of their surroundings for many, the very first time. For the very first time, many people have stopped, slowed down long enough, and said, whoa, what is it that we have been doing with our lives? And what have I been doing to perpetuate this or to continue this? And having to dive deep and do a very similar introspection to what I had to do after I died. This is a huge, huge moment of awakening. And we're still in the beginning stages of the thick of it. So it's going to feel like this. It's going to feel really rocky. But I know that just like my own personal experience, we have to focus our mindset and we have to go through those steps we've just discussed to get through, the really tough times and the uncertainty in order to find out what really is on the other side.
Wow, very, very powerful, very, very powerful, and yes, it is a time of awakening, and I think that's what really make people very uncomfortable, because it's something that they don't know, and they don't know really the next step. So it becomes very they start to panic. Some people actually become really sick, and it's hard. but like you said, it's gonna take baby steps. We're still at the beginning, so it's important that people understand that it's gonna be okay. We just have to keep, going, forward, and trusting the process, and understand that it will take time. It doesn't mean that, at some point we're not going to see the light. It will take time. We just have to, get and understand that we are in between two worlds, like you said, because I think a lot of people were lost into one world, and then this pandemic came, like you said, and then they stepped back and started to understand, oh, then there's something here happening, and we need to transition now. But there's still a lot of fear, and some people just don't want to go, and that's the thing, because they're actually getting out of their comfort zone, and they don't want to go. They don't want to be uncomfortable, and yet being uncomfortable is not the norm, and we have to accept that.
Right. Well,
Yeah.
it's very interesting, Marielle.
Mm-hmm.
One of the biggest breakthroughs I learned in my experience is that if I'm too comfortable, I actually start to get uncomfortable now.
Mm-hmm.
Because the
Mm-hmm.
truth is, this is again, this is part of our healing.
Mm-hmm.
Where the power of the self comes from is learning how resilient you really are.
Mm-hmm.
You're made from nature, and nature is ever changing, ever changing.
Mm-hmm.
Look at the beauty of a sunrise and a sunset at the
Mm-hmm.
end of every day. Look at the growth of your flowers in your garden or your favorite garden that you pass, and it starts to bloom, and then what happens after it has its life cycle? It returns to the earth. And again, it's very similar to what I was talking about in the beginning about how we distract ourselves
Mm-hmm.
from the truth, right? Because it's so uncomfortable. But when you learn to really flow with nature and flow with universal wisdom and flow with your inner truth, and that is the truth that comes when you are quiet and you're not bogged down with the news and other people's opinions. I'm talking your own quiet internal truth with you and your higher power. That's where you're going to find the stability,
Mm-hmm.
right? That's where I found the stability. There is no way I would have accomplished as much as I had the past 5 years if I turned to anything outside of my internal wisdom and my unique higher power.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So that is where your power is, like, period.
Mm-hmm.
So when you are feeling that fear, when you are feeling that discomfort, you will actually you will
Mm-hmm.
learn to feel secure and safe when you develop that internal relationship.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. It's not outside of you. And so when you develop that internal relationship, you're going to have this level of trust that as life goes like this,
Mm-hmm.
you always have this constant. You always have this constant alignment. That is your goal.
Mm-hmm.
That is your goal. Okay. So the creative elements, the doing the art, the spending time in quiet, filling up your vibration with things that feel good. That's where the comfort's going to be. You're going to like cozy up inside
Mm-hmm.
yourself. And guess what? Nothing can touch you inside.
Mhm.
Right? So always remember, this is my thing. When I get swept up by the world, Cherie, you know what you need to do. There's nothing outside. There's no justification you could do to make you feel better. There's no conversation you can have because that's just somebody else's opinion. It comes back into you. Get quiet with your own internal world. This is not a luxury. This is not a luxury. This is your life savings. This is coming from the woman that just died. And I am telling you, your power and your way through any obstacle is by going within and developing that relationship. That will make you that steady tree that can just kind of blow in the wind, right? But not collapse. Right?
Woo.
Yeah.
That's deep. That's really deep, and it's sometimes hard to to understand, because, like you said, we like to look outside
Yes.
or get advice from other people, or from, or even just limit ourselves to material things, think that that's our safety net. And yet we have something that is free inside of us,
Yes.
and we don't go there. We run away from it, and it is with us 24 hours a day,
Yes.
but we don't go there. We just avoid sitting down, thinking, and understand who we are, and get this connection with the higher power. Or for people who believe in God, get this connection with God, and really trust this process, because that's the key process. That's what actually is stable. That's what is not changing. And yet we prefer to go for the outside, and start to panic, because it's not stable. It's not a rock for us. It's not the right rock.
Yeah.
On what we can build something. And like you said, this pandemic is coming to force this message onto us, especially for
really is.
those who actually didn't have the opportunity to do that. Wow. It's so profound. And my last question is that, how do you do that in a technical environment where people are about what they see? It's about what you see. It's about concrete things. And how do they integrate this into technology and into STEM? It's can be very difficult.
It is difficult. And I always say, I say this a lot, but it really is baby steps, right? So you're not going to see a complete transformation overnight. And you're also not going to make people understand everything I just said overnight either, right? And so what's powerful is that even though you may not fully be able to grasp or take in everything I just said right now, this is always here to come back to. And that's the beautiful thing about wisdom, is sometimes we have to hear it more than once, right? Before you're like, oh, that's what she meant, right? And so that's why the goal is not to transform overnight. The goal is to start doing the inner work and start allowing that inner work to just, like with me, it's just who I am. So I say to people, okay, you want me to be the advisor on your board? Do you know who I am? First of all.
Yeah.
Okay. Because I'm not your average person that just was plucked out of the corporate space. Like, I've had a huge awakening. Like, have you seen my interviews? Have you seen how I show up on social media? Have you seen my writings? Like, yes, I'm in tech, but this side comes with me too. So you will see me for the first time in my life courageously say, that sounds great and all, but do you know who I am? Can you imagine being able to say that?
Not a lot of people do that, especially at this level.
Absolutely.
And being a woman in tech.
Why? Why? Because of the fear. We're so afraid that somebody's going to take something away from us. Instead, you're actually going to find the right people and the right scenario that truly embraces who you are and will utilize your value in full. Okay, that's courage.
Yeah.
That is what we all seek. You don't just want a job in tech. You want to make an impact, right? So again, this is that internal work. It is a journey to constantly say to yourself, what am I giving up by being in this role, being around these people, and what would it look like if I could show up as fully me in this industry? Because honestly, to me, that's the definition of a disruptor. So we love to use these terms, disruption and whatever, with people like Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos. Well, how about the women that have the courage to show up in STEM careers as their authentic self? Because here's the secret. That is where we are moving to. So the more you can start to explore yourself in tech, but get to know who you are at the core, you will be much stronger, much more prepared when this new world starts to emerge. So what if you use this time of the pandemic to not so much feel like you have to change everything on the outside, but just use this time to start going within and start saying, well, who is Cherie? And why do I love being in tech? And who do I really want to help? Do I just want to be, a woman of color in tech? Is that my goal? Or do I want to be a woman that is standing up in her true authentic self that is changing the world through tech? These are very powerful questions.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And they're not overnight questions, but I guarantee you, if you continue to think about these things and journal about these things every day as you're in the tech space, I guarantee you, over time, you are going to be in a really powerful position within the industry, because that type of awareness is not anything that AI can replace.
And that's it. That's it. The debate is,
Exactly.
Exactly. And that's the thing sometimes that we miss out. And I talk to women right now, is that some of us, when we go into, those male dominated, industry, we want to play the game of the men. But like you said, we have to come as we are with our authenticity and be really transparent about it and say, this is who I am. This is the value that I bring. And if you really want me around, this is the way I'm going to be. I mean, I'm not going to change myself to fit, the the rules or the norm of a man. I'm not a man. I'm a woman, and this is what I bring on the table to complement what a man can bring. And I think when we have this courage to do that, I mean, it becomes simple, because if we don't voice it, how can we, how can they understand that, we have value, we function this way? We have to educate them in a way and come strong. And I agree with you, is that, you have to say, okay, this is me. I'm a sensible person, or I believe in this, and this is what I can bring to the table. This is what's, the impact it's gonna have on the industry, or on your board, or on your company. But still, it's a added value, and that's what I can bring.
Yeah. And it always comes down to that's where your power is.
Mm-hmm.
So imagine, like, see, like, this is what I had to come to terms with. And I played that game for a long time, trying to be just like a man, until you're just wiped out, exhausted, and burnt out. But what I learned was I have so much more to give if I just show up as myself.
Exactly.
Like the value I have now that I'm just embodying my full self is endless. So you really have to think of, it's scary to make that transition, but you have to realize you're born here. If you're in tech, you were born for impact. I mean, I don't think there's any way of like skirting around that. Like, not just any woman walks into the tech industry. So, I pretty much know, you're here for impact. And if your heart is in the right place, I guarantee you, the world needs you, and it needs you in your full power.
Wow. Great message. And, we can go on and on. Let's have a last turn on, on the comment box. We have Cordelia from the US, Washington, DC. She loved that. Ephraim as well, remarkable story. We have Elder watching from North Carolina. And we have Corinne Hunter, and she's really, enjoying what you're saying, is that you thank you for being a trailblazing disruptor in this space. And that's what we want. That's what we want. That makes sense, so much sense. And she has another comment: the world has, needed you in full power. Thank you. And that's amazing. I mean, she's a powerhouse. She came, how she is, and she's making an impact. And that's really what it's all about, is that come as you are, be transparent, and play on your strength, and never actually try to be somebody else. Be yourself and just come as you are. And that's really the big lesson today from Cherie. And she's done it anyway. So, she's not talking about something that she's never done. So we can believe that it works, and she's making an impact in the tech, in the tech industry. She's one of the influential in the world globally as a woman. So Cherie, now that we know we're going toward the end of the show, how can people, get in contact with you to continue to have a conversation, or even just know more about you? Because there's so much more that I want people to know about you. Obviously, an hour plus is not enough, and so really, I'm talking to the audience here. Please get in contact with Cherie. Understand, what she's doing. Understand her story a little bit, deeper than what you've seen today, and get to know her and get to know the impact that she's making in the world. Cherie. where can we, how can we contact you?
Yes. Oh my gosh. Well, I would love for you guys to reach out to me if you'd like to know more, just explore. I have lots of exciting things coming up, including I'm really pulling together a lot of these key wisdom elements, these nuggets of wisdom that I really live my life by. So I'm working on a project right now to pull all of that together. So I'm really excited to be sharing that with all of you in the future. But for now, you can definitely visit my site, Cherie, there it is, CherieAimee.com, CherieAimee.com. I'm also on social media. Those links are also, all the social media links are on my website as well. And I also have, I just wanted to share, Mariel, I just started a beta community. It's very small because I really wanted to kind of test out some of this wisdom for healthcare, so or for self-care. So I started what's called the Self-Care Collective. It is practical solutions inspired by universal wisdom. And what I've done for the first month of July, we're probably going to do it for about 90 days. And I've taken the topic of, racism and colorism, and just, this topic that's at the forefront of the world right now. And I've seen a lot of books online, a lot of influencers that have their courses and stuff. But there was another element that I really wanted to pull into all this that was less about demanding people change overnight and more about, like I'm talking about, doing this inner work. And so for the month of July, and probably for the next 90 days, if you would like to, I'm just going to extend this just for your audience, actually. And anybody watching this, there is no cost right now. So if you would like to join in and learn about the discussion, where we're going to learn some of the fundamentals of the history of racism and how it's impacted our lives as people of color, blacks of the diaspora. And we're going to approach it, though, from a level of self-care and inner wisdom. So it's actually something I've never seen before. So
and that's the beauty of it, is that you have to start to try new things, even if you don't know how it's gonna that's part of it, that's part of the new way of doing things.
Absolutely. And so I've hidden the button, but I'm going to put it back up on my website as soon as we get off. And so if anybody watching would like to join in, I will keep the application open a couple more days. Again, there's no cost. I just really ask for committed people that really want to dive deep and kind of explore a different avenue of healing racism. It's really important.
So fantastic. So you've heard there's this offer on the table. So make sure you go on Cherie website and try to know a little bit more about it. And please join. I mean, there's no cost, and it's an opportunity, especially if you're still in lockdown, an opportunity to learn something and to have a different approach to racism, and participate as well, because your participation will help as well refine the process, because it's a new process. And don't hesitate. So thank you so much, Cherie, for all this wisdom that you brought today on the show, and for sharing your story, because it's an amazing story, and sometimes it can be very difficult as well, painful, because you went through so much. But you chose to conquer, and you chose wisdom, And we are so happy because now we have you as a very radiant, human being, and making now an impact using this story to help others and to make a great impact internationally. And in those areas where we thought it was not, nothing will change, like in tech and in STEM, and we see that you really living what you want to do, which is connecting the practical with the spiritual. So thank you so much for your time and for all this wisdom that you brought today. So we have a show tomorrow, because tomorrow I'm going to start a new series, a series on gender-based violence, and focusing mostly on South Africa, because there's a femicide going on there, and I really want to understand. And first of all, to explain to my global audience what's going on there, and really start to think about how we can heal the people who are involved, either as a perpetrator or as a victim, and really have all the ladies and the men to come in and talk about the problem and how we can solve it. So it starts tomorrow. I'm gonna have Claudia Roots. Claudia is a clinical social worker. She's based in South Africa, and she's also a counselor. She deals with trauma, and she's been in domestic violence herself, and since then she's been doing a lot of activism against exploitation of children and trauma of human trafficking. So it's going to be a very interesting session tomorrow as we start this series of shows. And then, so for those who still, don't want to be in contact me either for the show or for anything that, related to the guest. Please, these are my contacts. So my email, mtulekima@gmail.com, my website, and I'm on all the social media platform. And so that's all for today. We had an amazing show today with Cherie. And Cherie, before we leave, any last words to the audience?
Well, first of all, I want to thank you, Mariel. Thank you again for allowing me this time to really share the full experience and the wisdom, because it does take some time to get into. And thank you to all of you who showed up and are listening, and all of you on the replay. My biggest takeaway right now is to just let you know that I see you. I know these are really, really challenging times. And when in doubt, drop in and just breathe. Just focus on your breath. You can always take a few seconds, a few minutes to just drop in and breathe and recenter.
So simple techniques. So when in doubt, just drop in and breathe, and those are just simple technique that you can do, and that can actually help you tremendously. So thank you for that, and thank you for the audience for being here. It's been amazing to have you. You've been participating, and I hope that you've learned a lot from Cherie wisdom today, and that you will get the opportunity to not only, yes, to get the knowledge, but to apply it into your life and start to also engineer greatness in your house, in your family, in your communities, and why not globally. So thank you again, and see you all tomorrow, hopefully. Take care, and God bless you all. Bye.
Thank you.